You know what your problem is? I ain't got no problem, man. Don't tell me. Don't tell me what my problem is. Nigga, I don't give a
No one, not even the season crew, could have foreseen the sheer intensity that would emerge when Scrappy and Khaotic were placed in the same scenario, even as the cameras rolled to record the newest chapter in a season that had already seen its fair share of explosive events. What started out as just another prearranged altercation swiftly turned into a fierce one that would astound the actors and viewers. With the tension that only reality TV could provide, the Love and Hip Hop Atlanta set was electrifying. For Scrappy, who had been under a lot of personal strain lately due to relationship instability, family problems, and the show's relentless attention, it was a different type of day. Scratch was tense today, though, and it wasn't just the usual stress. It was chaotic and disorderly. Known for his sharp tongue and even sharper attitude, the brazen newcomer had been stirring things up ever since he joined the show. He had no difficulty picking fights, especially if it meant getting attention. Despite not being impressed by Khaotic's antics after years of being in the spotlight, Scrappy has been going crazy over Khaotic's recent challenges, taunts, and attempts to get under his skin. Throughout the weeks that the two men's anger had been building, Khaotic had been quietly ruining Scrappy's reputation by ridiculing his past relationships and his standing in the hip-hop and love communities. Although Scrappy tried to ignore it, he couldn't today. Innocently enough, the scene started. When the cameras rolled, the two men assumed the showdown, which the producers had set up, would be a verbal sparring match. However, Chaos launched into an attack, his voice brimming with derision. "You've been on this show for how long, and you still don't know how to handle your business?" Chaos's smirk simply served to exacerbate the situation by giving Scrappy the appearance of someone who was keen to elicit a response, and his words were like knives thrown at his pride. Scrappy's patience was wearing thin, and his jaw tightened. Despite his best efforts to maintain his composure, Chaos's persistent mocking was starting to wear him down. Opposed to fighting, "But this was special, you have to watch what you say, man." Scrappy wasn't going to tolerate Khaotic attacking his identity and reputation on the show in addition to talking about his relationships and personal life. Scrappy's voice was low, but it was warning. Naturally, a disorganized person didn't back down. Instead, he pushed harder. "No, watch what I say. I'm only expressing things as I see them. You're just another washed-up person pretending to be significant, and you're not built like Scrappy." His words were like a dagger, cutting through the tension in the room. Scrappy's hand shot out in one swift move, giving Chaos a brutal slap across the face. There was a thunderous crack that appeared to temporarily freeze everything in place as the impact echoed across the set. As Chaos' head wrenched to the side, the crew, who had been shooting with bated breath, gasped, his face displaying shock and surprise. Following an uncontrollable moment of disbelief, Fury quickly regained his composure. He rushed towards Scrappy, pushing past the security officers who had rushed to stop him, his eyes blazing with anger. To capture the moment, the camera zoomed in. The slap had ignited a fire that neither man seemed ready to extinguish, and there was no turning back from the chaos that was playing out in real time at the UN. "Don't you think you'll get away with merely slapping me?" Chaos roared as his fists clenched and his body strained with anger. Scrappy shot back, his voice full of wrath. "You've been running your mouth too long. Now you see what happens when you don't know how to stop it." With his own anger matching Chaos, Scrappy held his stance, his chest pumping from the adrenaline thrill. The cast and crew were scattered around the space, watching the two men square up in silence incredulously. Restricted by security, the producers immediately requested a break after realizing that the situation had gotten worse than they had anticipated. In an effort to defuse the situation, the crew quickly separated the men and pulled them in opposite ways. But the damage was already done as the cameras kept rolling. Only heavy breathing and muted shouting, indicating that this was now about respect as well as the slap. The tension, antagonism, and power struggle between Scrappy and Chaos that had been boiling beneath the surface were all symbolized by the smack. Scrappy's slap was more than just an emotional outburst. It was a public declaration that he would not be replaced or treated disrespectfully by anyone, not even Chaos. As the cameras continued to record the aftermath, it became evident that Love and Hip Hop Atlanta had just witnessed one of its most explosive moments to date. Although the battle may have temporarily halted, it was clear that their hostility was far from finished. While the audience around him hummed with excitement, he felt a terrifying calmness come upon him as he stood up. Scrappy's muscles clenched, and you could feel the tension in the air. Bambi, standing nearby, could feel the storm gathering because he had a chip on his shoulder and a history of verbal fights with the other cast members. She was aware that her husband would not take Chaos' insulting comments lightly. The stakes were different this time, though, and Scrappy wasn't about to allow anyone to get away with it. Scorning his wife with his patience wearing thin, Lil Scrappy took a step toward anarchy. Not on stage, not in front of an audience, and most definitely not without repercussions. Sensing what was going to happen, the crowd began to murmur. But Khaotic, who was still smiling, refused to back down. He was used to being the center of attention, but he quickly realized that things had suddenly gotten far worse than he had anticipated. When Lil Scrappy raised his hand and slapped her cheek wildly, her look was a mix of pride and comfort. She was always aware of Scrappy's, with some not knowing how to react and others possibly feeling subliminally pleased that someone had finally put Chaos in his place for Lil Scrappy. The remainder of the cast watched in stunned silence. The message was unmistakable: family comes first. The play continued, but the mood had shifted. The slap that echoed throughout the room, reminding everyone of how long Scrappy had defended her, would never be forgotten. The question of how this would alter the group dynamic moving forward, would he react anarchically, or had he finally faced his match in Lil Scrappy, remained unanswered as the camera zoomed out. One thing was certain: regardless of what happened next, this drama was anything but wildly chaotic. He quickly realized that things had gone far worse than he had expected, even though he was used to being the center of attention. However, she was aware of their unbreakable relationship, and something within her was roused as she witnessed him fiercely defending her. Be broken, and Scrappy's actions at that exact moment were more powerful than words could express. Unsure of how to react, some members of the cast may have secretly been pleased that someone had finally replaced Lil Scrappy with mayhem, while the rest of the cast stared incredulously in silence. The message was unmistakable: family comes first, no matter what. The show continued, but the tone had shifted. The slap that echoed throughout the room as the cameras panned out was a reminder of the extent Scrappy would go to for the people he cared about. How this will alter the group dynamic in the future was the question that persisted. Would he have responded angrily, or had he confronted Lil Scrappy at last? There was little question that this drama was far from over, regardless of what happened next. Scrappy's muscles clenched, and you could feel the tension in the air. Bambi, who was standing nearby, could feel the storm gathering when Chaos made offensive comments, and she knew her husband would not take it well because he was familiar with Chaos.